His preconditioned reflexes told him to fight, but his gut warned against it. Vorda was out cold and of little use. Ballack estimated 10 orcs from the stench, subtle variations in grunts and their orientation all around him. All were armed, wearing heavy flat coats and well organised. They had been watching the landing field, seen the two warriors enter, and had waited until their attention was on each other to ambush them. The old wound flared, and evinced a grimace. Ballack had never felt so old. He heard the orcs arguing, somewhere out of sight, falling back into their crude native language. Ballack's eyes were on Vorda. If the orcs wanted them dead, they would already be dead. That meant one thing. They wanted captives, and that meant they were going to move them.
Well,
Ballack said, scowling.
Let's get on with.
A savage blow shook his skull like a drum. Agony, then unconsciousness, stunted Ballack's tongue. Darkness came swift on its heels, filled with dreams of greenskins murmuring plans and uttering Thracker's name. As soon as Ballack awoke, he knew he was no longer in the crater. He was still kneeling, but now a thick iron chain shackled his ankles and wrists. Dank air assailed his nostrils. He could taste heat and warm metal on his tongue. The latter was blood. The former, he assumed, must be machinery of some kind. It was dark wherever they'd been taken, and closely confined. Quiet, too. The almost sub-aural drone of ongoing war had receded to nothing. We were underground, he realised. Before opening his eyes, scarcely even breathing, Ballack listened. The snorting, grunting echoes coming back at him from further down what he assumed was a tunnel suggested the orcs were close. Their stench was far away enough though, so he opened his eyes. Vorda was watching him. Blood had caked around his left eye, where it pooled from a gash on his forehead. It made a mess of the Crusader's cross, but that was the least of his worries. Careful not to raise a clamour with his own chains, Vorda lifted a gauntleted finger to his lips. About 10 strides separated them. A distant glow emitting from orc-lit fires softened the gloom and gave it an orange cast. Ballack waited, his eyes on Vorda, who was now looking past the Malevolent to something behind him. After a few more moments, Vorda met his gaze again. He held up a splayed hand, then quickly clenched and unclenched it. 10 greenskins, as Ballack had suspected. He tapped 2 fingers on his lips, and Vorda nodded slowly. "So they took us?" Ballack whispered, careful to keep his voice low. Vorda nodded a second time.
"They're overseers, and not alone,"
he hissed.
"I've seen and heard dozens of diminutive greenskins scurrying around. They were digging. Not now, though,"
Ballack replied, hearing only the muted conversation of the captors.
"Whatever tunnel they've made is being filled. Smell that?"
Over the orc stench, Ballack couldn't at first, but then he got a faint whiff of something. Fuels, oil, Visaline, promethium, all combustible.
"Where are we?"
he asked Vorda, carefully shifting around so he could look behind him. From the dead-end section they were chained in, the tunnel bent around at a sharp angle. Ballack saw bulky silhouettes, the errant flickers of fire.
"West, I think,"
said Vorda. "Of the landing strip?" That would bring them closer to Camp Fortis. The orcs were undermining, digging tunnels and lacing them with explosives. They meant to turn Camp Fortis into a sinkhole. Saboteurs. That explains why these greenskins were so organised. Orcs were beasts, but they retained some form of structure. Ballack had fallen foul of their forward scouts, the vanguard. A large horde was coming, headed for Fortis. Bring down the camp, attack whilst it was in disarray. Ballack shuffled back around. "Our weapons?" he was about to ask, when he heard the tramp of booted feet behind him. The guttural laugh he heard as the orcs got close to him told him that whatever they had planned wasn't good.
"St."
Vorda was glaring when Ballack turned back.
"You and I are not done, Malevolent,"
he said, and drew his thumb across his gorget.
I made an oath to Tiamat.
Ballack nodded, uncaring at the moment.
Something tells me you're going to get your chance.
A kick in his back sent Ballack sprawling onto his chest. They did the same to Vorda too. Ballack watched sideways as his face was pressed into the ground under an orc's boot. Rough hands rubbed his shoulders and arms. He felt a savage tug on the chain linking his wrists and ankles as he was yanked to his feet.
Boys, down.
Ballack obeyed, but had seen everything he needed to already. 6 orcs, 3 apiece, 2 minders on each shoulder for both of him and Vorda, another one on each of their chains, a pistol in their other hand. Closest to the tunnel mouth, Ballack was being led out in front.
You'll regret this, filth!
He heard Vorda spit, for which he got another beating. As the cudgels and fist rains heavy on the Templar, the orc clutching Ballack's chain decided to shove the business end of his pistol under the Malevolent's chin. It forced Ballack's chin up, but he still kept his eyes on the beast. It was a little shorter than Malevolent, and almost as broad without armour. Tough, but not monstrous.
You hate him, eh? Want to kill him?
The orc paused to twist the muzzle of the pistol into Ballack's gullet. He could hear Vorda's grunts of pain and the hard smack of clubs hitting his body. Ballack met the greenskin's squinty porcine eyes and gave a slight nod. Not as much as I want to kill you, you stinking swine. The orc held Ballack's gaze a little longer, as if gauging the truth of his response, and then laughed. Half grunt, half squeal, it made Ballack want to wrench the cleaver hanging from the orc's belly and bury it in the beast's ugly skull. Instead, he smiled. "And he really wants to kill me," he said, struggling to eke the words out with the pistol jammed in his throat. The orc's humour quickly faded, at the same time as the others stopped beating Vorda. Its sharp eyes betrayed a savage intelligence.
You're gonna get a chance, warrior.
It promised.
Both of yous.
They were dragged into a shallow basin of rockcrete, overlooked on 3 sides by deep ledges filled with cackling, rowdy greenskins. They awaited a spectacle. Black had a good idea what that would be. He was led into the rockcrete sink, to the guttural jeers of orcs and the whining hooting of the lesser greenskins, known as Gretchen. All work on the tunnel had been ceased as the labourers were afforded a little sport. It fed off the dry sink, only partially dug, jammed with explosives. The damp would foul some of the fuses, but there was so much that Ballack could see through a grated porthole in the sink wall that it wouldn't matter. Once the orc miners had him in position, he was beaten as the chains were removed from all but one wrist, and then attached to an iron ring bolt into the rockcrete floor. They did the same to Vorda, who looked wary after a second battering from the orc cudgels. The Templar gazed contemptuously, first at Ballack, then the greenskins around the sink, until it came back to Ballack again.
They'll have us fight to the death, Vorda. You and me. Then they'll kill who survives. Probably eat us both.
Each chain was held taut, so neither gladiator could attack until the appointed moment. Ballack thought that just as well, given the Templar's mood.
So long as you die first by my hand, I can live with that. Vengeance makes you short-sighted, brother.
Vorda sneered.
You are not my brother. Oi! Run!
A deep, guttural voice bellowed above the clamouring greenskins.
And aid Argot.
The rowdy mob quietened down, responding to the orc obviously in charge. Argot sat on a slab of rock, a savage king on his throne, his subjects arrayed before him. Ballack had to turn to see the orc, but both he and Vorda watched the beast as he spoke. Argot was bigger than the rest, but this was not unusual for greenskins who valued strength above all else. He had one hobnail boot perched on a crate, using it like a footstool. Ballack saw the glint of blades and a bolt of stock. This was where the greenskins had put their weapons.
"You scum are gonna fight to the death."
Arguk's declaration was met with roars of approval from the mob.
"Hand to hand."
The roaring intensified.
He has us under his boot, Templar.
Said Ballack, having seen enough of the Orc King.
Under his boot.
Vorda's anger blinded him to what Ballack was trying to tell him. He only saw as far as his desire for vengeance.
Enough words, Malevolent.
His fists were already clenched. He'll come at me like a freight hauler, thought Ballack. Agrok's deep belly laugh mocked every shred of honor. "Yeah, you're gonna give us a good fight, to the death." The greenskins bellowed in unison. Both chains were slacked off. Vorda's charged. Ballack let him, bringing up his knee into the Templar's stomach as he tried to tackle him around the waist. Vorda put such ferocity into the charge that Ballack was heaved off his feet anyway. He threw a punch and felt it strike cheekbone. A second blow got hooked by Vorda's forearm, and Ballack had a flash of white-hot pain as the Templar's forehead connected with his chin. Stunned, he scrambled back, getting to his feet and spitting out blood. He eyed the Templar, trying to shut out the crushing noise coming from the greenskins above. One of the beasts threw a Gretchen into Vorda's back. It stalled the Templar's next attack, but only as long as it took him to grab the shrieking little greenskin. To grab the shrieking little wretch and snap its neck. That drew a welter of cruel and raucous laughter. The din increased. Vorda came at him again, Ballack letting him take the initiative. He ducked a heavy punch, then blocked an overhand, but took one in the gut. Like a pugilist, Ballack went in close and pinned Vorda's arm, trapping him in a bear hug.
Afraid to die?
The Templar hissed, his spittle hitting Ballack's cheek as they were so close. He struggled, but Ballack held him. The pain in his wounded side was immense, but he held him.
There is no honour in this,
he said, gritting his teeth with the effort of containing the Templar. Above, the greenskins were getting restless for more blood.
If it's all I have left, I'll take it. As entertainment for this filth? I know I'm better than that, so you must be.
For a moment, Vorda stopped struggling.
How?
Ballack grinned through the barricade of his teeth.
Make them angry, get our guns from under the chieftain's boot. If you betray me,
Vorda warned,
then we're dead anyway.
They broke apart, Ballack making a show of thrusting the Templar back. Agrok had got to his feet, his voice rose above the clamour.
"My lads ain't happy. They want spleen, and so do I."
The Orc turned to one of the minders.
"Give 'em each a blade."
Two rough-looking blades were tossed into the pit, ringing as they hit the ground. A crude axe and rusty meat cleaver. The Orcs wanted them to literally butcher one another. Ballack took the axe, as it was closest. The fight had shifted, so they were side onto Agrok's throne. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the big Orc was still on his feet, trying to rabble-rouse the others and prevent a riot. Some of the Orcs carried pistols, but none of them were currently armed. They were too engrossed in the fight, forgetting the nature of their prey. Vorda had the cleaver. He gave it a few practice swings. Ballack saw some of the greenskins emulating him with imagined blades of their own. Their mocking laughter boiled his blood.
Come on then,
he whispered, and hoped the Templar upheld his side of the bargain. Vorda ran at him, blade held high. The Templar was a better swordsman than he. It left him exposed to a counter, or it could have been a feint. Ballack had 3 short breaths to the side. The axe felt heavy in his grip. Despite its crudity, it could have caused some serious damage. They'll kill who survives. Probably eat us both, Ballack remembered his own words. Time to find out if he believed them. Vorda came in hard and swinging. Ballack crouched down onto his knees with the axe held flat against the ground. He felt the pressure on his back as Vorda used it to vault. Rising, Ballack heard Agrok's roar of anger emerge into the desperate pain scream. The orc had a cleaver jutting from his neck, rammed there by a Vengeful Templar. It took only a few seconds for the orcs to realise what had happened. Slow-witted, despite their ostensible intelligence. One of the miners dropped into the pit, reaching for a club instead of a gun. Foolish. Ballack seized its arms, halting the cudgel in mid-swing, and turned the orc into ablative armour. As the solid shot soared down into the pit, the miner shuddered as its back was threaded with slugs. Blood coughed up all over Ballack's chest, and then he dropped the beast, which was all but shredded anyway. Vorda had his blade and pistol, another dead orc at his feet. Agrok was a cold corpse, near decapitated and slumped against his throne. About to engage another greenskin, he shouted,
Take up your arms, Malevolent!
A bolt pistol landed in the pit, and Ballack swept it up. He took aim through the granite porthole, sighting the furthest barrel of fuel in the half-dug tunnel, and fired. The explosion was immense. The earth shook, chunks of rubble and cataracts of dust spilling from the tunnel roof. A heartbeat lapsed after the initial incendiary roar, before giving birth to a firestorm that surged out the excavated tunnel and into the area. Vorda leapt off the ledge and thrust his body against the wall that faced the blast. Ballack was already hunkered down and gave him a knowing wink as their eyes met. Most of the greenskins were too slow. Ballack saw several caught in the blast, hanging in the air as they tried too late to jump to safety, their bodies instantly aflame and seared black. Flung corpses soared over Ballack's head, furiously catapulted aloft as a tongue of fire speared through the porthole like a heavy flamer. Crisp, burning greenskin meat turned the air inside the pit rancid. Smoke choked everything. An orc staggered through the grey cloud, lunging wildly. Vorda left the wall and cut it down. Two-handed, shoulder to hip, he impaled a second one, piercing its sternum. A deafening pistol burst killed the other, flooding the smoke haze with muzzle flare as Ballack did his part. Between them, they accounted for 12 greenskins who had survived the explosion. After Ballack finished the last, snapping the Gretchen's neck with a severed twist of his boot, the Malevolent and Templar faced one another across a killing field. "You fought well," said Vorda, as the smoke began to dissipate.
That was an honourable deed, for us to join swords instead of lock them. I don't know if I would have had enough temperance to do that.
Ballack gave a hollow laugh.
Does this mean you don't want to kill me anymore?
He felt raw, and hardly in the mood for another fight. Certainly not one against a Black Templar. If he had to, he would. Vorda had kicked the crate into the pit, scattering their weapons. Ballack's chainsword was close. He walked over to it slowly, grasped the hilt, and felt some of his strength return. Vorda hadn't answered, and when Ballack looked up to find out why, he saw the Templar bent over Tiamat's blade. It would be so easy. Thumb the ignition, stab him through the back. He was wounded. He'd be slow. Ballack raised the chainsword, his thumb over the stud. He let it fall. Enough treachery for one day, he thought. Agrok's corpse was roasting somewhere above. He'd take the orc's tusks and give them to Castor, show he still had teeth. Ballack smiled at that, turning his back on Vorda to go and claim his trophy. In the crucible of battle, all grievances are forgotten.
Until we meet again, bro.
The words stuck in Ballack's throat. At the same time, Vorda drove Tiamat's blade into his back. It pierced Ballack's chest, tearing through the Malevolent's heart.
No, brother,
Vorda hissed into his ear, tightening the hilt so it churned Ballack's organs.
Now, you stabbed me in the back.
Ballack could barely breathe, let alone speak.
Sacrificing honour, but avenging Tiamat,
said Vorda, pushing the blade deeper.
Was it worth it?
Ballack croaked, spitting up flecks of blood.
Never, but at least you'll be dead.
The grains had almost run out for Ballack, but he smiled through his red-rimmed teeth as he uttered his final words.
Shame. Think I'm beginning to like you, Templar.
Ballack laughed, spewing up more blood, and then hung on Tiamed's sword until Vorda wrenched it loose and left him amongst the other mouldering dead.